Είναι πάρα πολλά τα θέματα. Το βασικότερο είναι τα φάρμακα, τα οποία τα ψάχνουμε.
Από εκεί ξεκινάνε όλα. Απλώς πεινάνε τα παιδιά του κόσμου.
Χρειάζονται όσο ποτέ άλλοτε την ψυχοκοινωνική υποστήριξη. Η κυβέρνηση έχει αποφασίσει να περιορίσει κατά 50% τις δαπάνες στον χώρο της ψυχικής υγείας.
During the last 5 years, the Greek population has been sacrificed, and the people are being asked to suffer more and more to repay a debt, and it's striking people who had nothing to do with the creation of the debt.
If any given government is cutting salaries, cutting subsidies to the health system, the education system, the social impact can be immediately seen because a person can be dying because of financial crisis, literally dying.
We live in a fast-paced world on a crowded planet. We move quickly through our lives, and when something happens, we would hope, we would expect that there'd be a hand to help us.
International human rights law offers some standards in the way that a government and also lenders have to behave in a context of financial crisis. For example, there's a minimum core human rights obligation that has to be respected, no matter what.
By 2009, a group of academics and a few legal advisors to NGOs got together, preoccupied with this idea that we had these obligations of international assistance and cooperation, obligations to strangers in international law, but the information hadn't been consolidated. States weren't aware, and many others weren't aware, of actually what this obligation entailed. And we spent several years drafting, reviewing, and discussing, along with a wider group of people, what became known as the Maastricht Principles.
The Maastricht Principles, they are so important. I think they are changing our way to understand human rights in the modern economy. I mean, they are so helpful to frame the problems.
When the debt crisis hit, and in particular austerity became the prevalent doctrine, it was extremely familiar to me, and I was very bothered that this was still happening and could still happen. And then I decided to start researching what was going on with austerity in Europe and using Greece as a case study because so much was happening there. People in Greece suffered, and they suffered not only because what their own government did and didn't do, but because what other governments did and didn't do. It is precisely what we looked at in Maastricht, and it was remarkable that when it comes to Europe, and with so many states that have human rights obligations, that they were disregarded in their entirety in the crafting of conditionalities that were then imposed on the people of Greece, and with terrible repercussions.
This paper is a very important tool in the hands of the Greek society. And I do believe that the fact that they exposed human rights violations was a decisive factor for this to become a publicly acknowledged fact. So this is contribution to human rights defense and human rights protection in the making, I would say.
Dr. Solomon's contribution to a better understanding of the legal implications of the crisis in Greece has been so important to helping us understand and shape responses to these modern problems.
International solidarity is of the essence. Humanity has committed itself ever since the end of the Second World War never to allow this kind of violations. I do think that there's also an interest in other nations to become aware of what has been happening to Greece, because what's now happening in Greece is sure to be repeated in other countries.
It matters to live in a world where people are valued. So in a sense, an intrinsic reason to honor these obligations, to care about others. But there's another, perhaps instrumental reason, and that's merely because it could be you. So it's great to lend a hand because there might come a point where you need a hand yourself, and under current conditions of globalization, it may not be too long.